to stay on this side. So I'm going to hold down Control and drag. And now I'm going to pin the leading space to the container margin. Okay? Boom, that did that. Still have orange going on here. That's because I haven't specified anything about the vertical position of this label. So I'm going to pin the top to the top. So hold Control again, drag up here, and this is now top space. Notice that it realizes where I am dragging to and from, right? So they can give me options that make sense, like top space to layout guide here. So I'm going to do that. So now I'm starting to get blue lines. You see these lines? I hope you can see that there. They're solid blue, not orange or red. Okay, that's because they're okay. So we are okay horizontally here, but we still have a problem vertically. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the problem is vertically because I really don't want the bottom of this. I just want it to hang out wherever it wants to hang out based on the size of my font or whatever. So I don't really want to specify anything here. So why is this orange and how do I get rid of this? Well, anytime you have orange, when you're doing this layout stuff and you don't know what to do, you want to go down to this button right here. Okay, this is the document outline. And when you click this, the little thing will slide out, a little shelf here. And this is an outline view of everything that's in your UI, okay? And they're linked. So if I click the background, nothing is selected, then the background, the view, is what's selected here. But if I click this L0, which means a label with 0 in it, look, it selected my 0 label. And vice versa, if I click on this here, it's selected over here. So this is this same thing in an outline mode. This is really nice to have. Sometimes you have views that are overlapping and they're kind of in each other's way. You can always go here to select the one you want, okay? And you can control drag to these over here too. It's just as much control draggable as some of these other things. But we'll talk about top layout guide, bottom layout guide a little later. But what I really want you to focus on is this little yellow circle up here. Okay, anytime you got yellow and orange problems with this auto layout business, you're going to get this little yellow circle appearing in your document outline. And if you click it, it'll slide in a list of all the problems. And so here, I'll highlight over this. This is where all the orange and yellow is. It's saying the label with the 0 in it expected the height to be 39, but the actual height is 57. Well, that's because after I set this font, I just dragged this down a little bit to make space, right? I didn't know it was supposed to be 39. I just dragged down. And so it's saying that's wrong. Now, I could just try drag it back up and meet this dashed line. This dashed line, by the way, is where it's kind of saying this is really where this thing wants to be, but the solid lines are where it actually is. So I could kind of drag it up to there, but I could be off by a pixel or something else. A much more reliable way is to click this little yellow triangle, okay? So I'm going to click this yellow triangle. It's going to bring up this pop-up window, and there's 3 ways to fix the problems, okay? One way, update constraints, this middle way right here. That's a way that says, hey, I want this label to be right where it is. So just make some constraints, make it up, make it happen. And it'll put some wacky constraints in there like 52 high, which is a bad constraint for it to be 52 high because this label wants to be its natural height. It doesn't want to be 52 high. So this is kind of forced constraints. You almost never want this one. Okay? Rarely do you want to force the constraints. Reset to suggested constraints would probably just work here. I'm not going to choose this one, but it would probably work. This one is going to make the constraints match the blue lines. Those dashed blue lines that I told you always want to meet, those are what's going to help the system pick suggested constraints. So since we dragged that label out to the blue lines perfectly, I'll bet if I said reset to suggested constraints, it might just work. Okay? But I'm actually going to show you this last option up on top, which is update frame. And what this says is take into consideration all the rules and move this label to where the rules say it should be. Okay? And I like this option a lot because it lets you kind of preview, do I have my little rules right? Okay, so let's try that. Let's see if we'll tell this label, go ahead and move yourself and size yourself to obey these 3 rules we put in, and we'll fix the misplacement. So let's try it. And sure enough, it did it. It says there are no auto layout issues. If I go back to my document outline, this little yellow circle is gone. If I look in my view, everything is blue lines, no yellow or red. Okay? So that's your crash course on auto layout. And we're going to talk a lot more about auto layout. In fact, even on Wednesday, I'm going to do another auto layout with all the buttons. right? The keypad buttons and all that, which is a lot more things being laid out. But let's see if this fixes our problem. Let's go ahead and run our application again. So I'm just hitting that play button. Here, oh, we got our 0 this time. You see how it pinned this 0 to that edge? And not only that, if we rotate this phone, which you can do in the simulators menu, hardware, rotate, look, the 0, this got wider, and the 0 kept pinning itself over to that. And it also stayed on the top, even though this whole thing got shorter. Okay, and if I rotate back, the 0 stays there. Question?
So what did it do with the bottom edge? Like what did the actual update frame end up doing?
What did the update frame in the document outline do?
Yeah, so
it moved this bottom edge up. You see, this is only 39 pixels high now. It was 52. So yeah, it just moved it up. And if other things had been yellow, it could have moved the whole thing, right? It would move that whole rectangle wherever the rule said. But in this case, it fixed that one problem by moving it up. Good question. Okay, so that's good. All right, so that's it for auto layout part 1. So now let's talk a little bit about connecting our user interface that we're building right here up to the code, because we want that code to be able to talk to the user interface. Otherwise, how are we going to have the number buttons make numbers appear up here in the display, or the times button give the results of the calculation up here? We've got to be able to talk to this. So how do we do that? And the answer, first step, is we need to get both this Swift code, the controller, and this view on screen at the same time, okay? Because we're going to connect them, so we need them on screen at the same time. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but I'll do the simplest way right here, which is this little button called the Assistant Editor. All right, so I'm going to click that, and look, it put them both on screen at the same time, exactly what I wanted. Now, it's all a little crowded here. Even if I expand my view a little bit, it's like, it's all smashed in here. Luckily, the navigator and the utilities can also be hidden. See these buttons up here, these 3 buttons? This left one, if you click it, hides the navigator, and this right one, if you click it, hides utilities. Okay? So now we have both my UI, and over here we can still double click to zoom out. But the thing is, anytime we're actually connecting our UI to our code or trying to edit anything in here, you need to be zoomed to normal. Okay? For example, if I tried to select, if I'm zoomed out and I try to select this 0, I just can't. This is really kind of a bird's eye view. It's just for seeing what your UI looks like. If you want to actually work on it, you double click to zoom in on the scene that you're interested in. Okay, so here's our Swift code. I'm actually going to delete these. We don't need them for the calculator. We will need these things for future applications, but we don't need it for the calculator. And this is your first look at Swift. Okay, so Swift, as I said, very concise language, but it's basically an object-oriented language. It's going to look a lot like C. Some things look a lot like Java. It's kind of, best of a lot of different worlds at once. Now, this import is just importing the UI portion of iOS. You usually won't have to specify import yourself unless you start using frameworks that are not, the base frameworks, and we'll get to that probably weeks into the quarter where you finally have to do an import yourself. So this is how it automatically got put here for us. And so this is really your first line of Swift code. Okay? Appropriately, it's a definition of a class, because Swift is fundamentally object-oriented, and here we're defining a class. So what does the syntax look like to define a class? You got the keyword class, you got the name of the class. Now, this name, view controller, pretty bad name, okay? It's very generic. Really, this should probably be something like calculator view controller, something specific to this particular scene that we're working on right here that it's controlling. This is the default name it gives you. I don't want to spend the valuable demo time showing how to rename this, because unfortunately I can't just type a new name here because I got to keep the UI in sync with it, so I would have to do something in the UI as well. But for now, for your first assignment or two, we'll just call this view controller, but down the road you're going to want to pick better names. And of course you're going to be building multiple of these scenes in this class in the same app in the future, so of course they'll all have different controller names. Okay? This colon UI view controller, that's inheritance. That's its superclass. Okay? Swift is single inheritance, so you can only inherit from one class. It's perfectly fine in Swift not to inherit from a class if you don't want to. All right? But here, we have to inherit from UI view controller because we want all this magic that allows us to control the UI, like that whole auto layout business, and there's a ton of mechanism in here for allowing the controller to control this UI. So obviously we do that. So all view controllers, all controllers of these little scenes always inherit from either from UI view controller directly, or they inherit from a class that inherits from UI view controller up the chain. And then inside this curly brace is simply all the instance variables and methods in this class.